Hi everybody, it's Jackie Luqman. Usually I broadcast on coffee, current events, and politics in Luqman Nation, but I decided to do a little stream today from my own page because I wanted to talk about some of the stuff that I've been seeing. Hey Sonia. Hey Diff. Online the past couple of days since this whole Kavanaugh Supreme Court business is going on. Hey, James and Johnny, what's going on? So I've been just like driving around from church. I just got out of church. Had to do some announcements. There's a lot of stuff going on at my church where I'm the moderator, so I do like grown-up stuff at my church, and it's a lot of work, and it's very tiring, and it is a lot of pressure. It's very stressful, but it's also very rewarding. And that's in addition to my regular job, which is also kind of stressful. And in addition to, what's up, Delante? What's going on? And in addition to activism and stuff. So, I mean, there's all this stuff going on in my life, all this stress, and I'm a wife, and I still don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do that. I'm telling you, I don't know what I'm doing. He's still there. He's still with me. So I guess I'm doing something right. I'm still with him. He's doing something right. I'm not the one to give anybody advice on marriage or being a wife or how to keep people happy. I don't know. But that's my life. It's so I find these little moments in time where I'm thinking about all this stuff, and I'm always thinking about stuff, whether it's work or church or society or political issues, and of course this week it's been political issues. Because I've seen people really, really upset about, the Kavanaugh confirmation. First of all, told you he was going to be confirmed. I told you this. We told you this in Luqman Nation. We told you he would be confirmed. Abdus wasn't sure. He wasn't sure that he was going to be confirmed, but I was. And I can't point to any particular thing that gave me any additional wisdom. I just felt in my core of cores that he was going to be confirmed no matter what came out. But I've been really disturbed by some of the responses that I've seen from a lot of nice white ladies. And listen, let me give you this disclaimer right now. If you're not the type of white lady I'm about to talk about, if this is not you, if you do not believe this, if you do not act this way, if you know better than this, then I'm not talking about you. So don't come back with not all white ladies. No, I'm not talking about all white ladies. I'm talking about the ones who are guilty of what I'm about to tell you about. Hey, Lisa. All these white ladies who are just, in the streets rending their clothes, throwing ashes on their heads and putting sackcloth on because Brett Kavanaugh has been confirmed to the Supreme Court. There's some of, okay, I get that you're upset. I get that you're upset because Roe versus Wade, you're afraid that Roe versus Wade is going to be overturned. Oh, okay, I get that you're upset about that. And I'm not telling you that you shouldn't be upset about that. What I am saying is that how are you only upset that Roe versus Wade might get overturned, but you didn't care that the Supreme Court upheld stop and frisk? How is that see, I don't understand how it is when you're concerned that the Supreme Court, this new this new makeup of the Supreme Court with Brett Kavanaugh on the court now might overturn a decision that you think has an impact on your life, but you didn't care when the Supreme Court, before this administration, long before this administration, upheld that the police can stop people on the street and search them without a warrant as long as they had a reasonable suspicion. that that person has committed a crime. That's where stop and frisk came from. How were you not mad at the Supreme Court when they did that? You want to know how? You know what? You want to know how and why those people, those nice white ladies who are wailing in the streets and crying on park benches in front of the Supreme Court, weren't concerned about that Supreme Court ruling? Because that shit don't happen to them. That's why the cops in their neighborhoods don't stop them on the street, because they're not ever suspected of committing any crime. But wherever there are black people, and it doesn't have to be just poor black people in the hood, it can be black people in PG County, which is the richest county in this country. Cops have a constitution. Cops have a right, not constitutional, but cops have a right, according to the Supreme Court, to just randomly stop anybody on the street as long as they suspect them of committing a crime. That doesn't happen to white people in most places. I'm not going to say it doesn't happen to white people at all. I'm sure it does. But disproportionately, you know that's us. But see, the nice white ladies who are afraid of Roe versus Wade being overturned don't care about that, because they know that stuff isn't going to happen to them. I understand that nobody wants someone who is accused of sexual assault, not just by one person, but by multiple people, and who is a documented liar. We know that Brett Kavanaugh has lied under oath before in his confirmation hearing, his job interview, to be on the federal bench. We know that. That's been documented. Nobody wants a person like that as a Supreme Court justice. But do y'all not understand what the whole Anita Hill, Clarence Thomas hearings were about? Do you not remember that? I understand that a lot of nice white ladies who are like literally terrified about Brett Kavanaugh being on the Supreme Court may not even have been born during the Clarence Thomas, Anita Hill hearings. But you're on the internet and you've seen the name Anita Hill enough in your online travels to have Googled that shit. So I don't understand. I don't understand these women who are like, oh my God, we can't have a sexual predator on the Supreme Court. You already have a sexual predator on the Supreme Court. And Clarence Thomas wasn't the first one. I can't remember. There was another judge. Well, I wouldn't call him a sexual predator, but it was salacious that at some point there was another justice who was caught with a prostitute. That doesn't make him a sexual predator, but that does kind of call into question his quote unquote morals and ethics. Two consenting adults, okay, but come on. Not only do we already have a sexual predator on the Supreme Court, had one before yesterday, and his name is Clarence Thomas, but we've also had sexual predators in the White House before. And this is where I'm really, really pissed off at some of you nice white ladies, because some of you are sitting here online saying crap like, well, would Hillary have nominated a sexual predator for the Supreme Court? Hell yeah, she's married to one. And these nice white ladies are making these ridiculous excuses for why this is why we told you to vote for Hillary Clinton, because the Supreme Court matters. Well, the Supreme Court screwed you over in Bush v. Gore. What's that got to do with it? What? The Supreme Court has always been, let's make this really clear about what the Supreme Court is. What the Supreme Court has always done. The Supreme Court has always been the defender of white supremacy in this country through interpreting the Constitution and through establishing the implementation of federal law. That's the Supreme Court, other than a few cases where it has narrowly upheld affirmative action, and I do mean narrowly. narrowly. They're like, yeah, we're not going to outlaw affirmative action because it's not unconstitutional, but we're not going to let you use it to the extent that it was originally intended. I mean, it was the Supreme Court that actually overturned the Civil Rights Act of 1875, which was a much farther reaching Civil Rights Act than the one that was signed into law in 1964. That was the Supreme Court then. Brett Kavanaugh had nothing to do with that. The Republicans didn't have nothing to do with that. We're talking about conservative and liberal ideology influencing the decisions that the Supreme Court justices have made. So their party affiliations really had less to do with how they ruled as opposed to their view on society, whether the individual justices were more liberal-minded in the way they viewed society or whether they were more conservative-minded in the way they viewed society. And if you look at the history of Supreme Court rulings in regard to race relations, police overreach, and corporate guidelines, how corporations operate in society and how members of society can interact with corporations, the Supreme Court has ruled pretty consistently on the side of extreme caution. And caution isn't even the right word. It's like the Supreme Court has pretty consistently ruled that, yeah, we know you're being oppressed, but the Constitution really doesn't say we can do anything about fixing that, so we won't. And when it comes to the police and how the police can operate in society, the Supreme Court has pretty consistently ruled, with the exception of a few cases where they have ruled that the police have to have a warrant to search your property, to search a vehicle on your property. They've given cops pretty much a lot of latitude to do what they want to citizens, as long as the cops can say we had a reasonable suspicion that this person has done something wrong. And the Supreme Court has also pretty consistently ruled on behalf of corporations, giving them a whole lot of autonomy and not giving them any guidelines as far as answering to anybody else. I mean, it was the Supreme Court before Brett Kavanaugh that gave us Citizens United, that ruled that corporations are in fact people. That's not Brett Kavanaugh's fault. And that has affected us already in the amount of money that we are seeing politicians spend on campaigns to get elected in places like Chicago, of all places, where you've got two multimillionaires running to be governor of a state that is just in the toilet. The whole state is just so badly run. But you've got J.B. Pritzker, who's the Democrat, he's supposed to be the person who's better than the Republican candidate, who is the current governor, Rauner. J.B. Pritzker has spent so far $146 million of his own money to run his campaign to be governor of Illinois, when $146 million would have saved half of the public schools that Rahm Emanuel closed in Chicago. But he's able to do that, and other candidates are able to spend that much money and get that much more in contributions from sources who don't have to report it, because the Supreme Court, before Trump and Kavanaugh, ruled that corporations are people. That's why your candidates suck. That's why all our candidates suck, people, because the people with the money are the ones who are getting the most exposure. But people are concerned. All these nice white ladies are falling down in the street, screaming and crying because Brett Kavanaugh being on the Supreme Court is going to ruin their lives. Oh, yeah? The Supreme Court has handed down rulings that have continued to ruin the lives of poor and especially Black and Latino people in this country in regard to our autonomy and our right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures, which is supposed to be a constitutional right under the Fourth Amendment. The Supreme Court has routinely ruled that citizens don't really have that right. But these people are saying, now we have the worst Supreme Court in the history of this country. Bullshit. I call bullshit on that. I call absolute ignorance and bullshit on that. People who say that, who believe that, clearly do not know the history of this country. I don't expect people to know every Supreme Court ruling. I had to go look a few up. But I remember those rulings that the Supreme Court made that gave police wide berth to violate people's rights as long as they could say they had a reasonable suspicion. That affects us all the time. But see, we can't talk about that because it's not reproductive rights. And that's the only thing it seems like some of these women are concerned about. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't be concerned about reproductive rights. Of course you should. I have no business in your uterus. I don't want you in mine. Nobody has any business telling us what to do with our bodies. It's our business. It's not the government's. That whatever we do with our bodies is between us, our bodies, and whoever else we decide to involve. But please don't think that everything was peachy keen and wonderful for the rest of us up until now because you are afraid now. We've been afraid. We have been afraid. Poor and Black people in this country and poor Latinos in this country have been afraid, and gay people in this country and disabled people in this country. We have been afraid of this government for centuries because this government, through politics and politicians and through Supreme Court rulings, have repeatedly, routinely made it clear that our rights don't matter. That the rights of people who don't have money, who don't have social status, just do not matter. And the thing I think that angers me so much is seeing how social media has been able to elevate these discussions about white supremacy and what it is, and white male patriarchy and how it feeds into white supremacy, and the fight against these things, and how nobody gets justice in this country unless you dismantle white supremacy. Nobody does. Nobody. So social media has been great in amplifying that message and spreading it around the world and enabling these conversations among people who normally would never physically meet in person. That's great and that's wonderful. But social media has also been the place that has propagated some really stupid ideas. Like, there's this meme going around now where people are saying, some of these nice white ladies are saying that, when the national anthem is played, every woman and girl in America should take a knee. Now, I'm not addressing this to any particular person who shared this meme. I don't want anybody to think that I'm talking about you, because I know a couple of people who are on my friends list and a couple of people I know personally who shared this meme, and I've entered into discussions with them about why that meme is problematic. So I'm not talking about y'all, but for the rest of you who are either sharing this meme or you've seen it and you think this is a good idea, let me stop you. Let me stop you right now. That's a ridiculous, horrible, insulting idea. Do you know why? Because if you have to tell people that they should be kneeling when the national anthem plays now, if you have to tell them that now, then that means they weren't kneeling before. And if they weren't kneeling before, then that means they didn't give a shit about why we were kneeling before. Hey, Tony. Hey, Lashana. That's what that means. If you got to tell women and girls in this country that they should kneel when the national anthem gets played now, what that means is you recognize that kneeling during the national anthem was an act that was meant to call attention to a specific injustice that was done by a specific group of people that you just didn't give a shit about because you didn't think it had anything to do with you. Didn't affect you. Oh, but now that you're scared, now that your feelings are hurt, now that you think somebody's coming down your street and gonna be all up in your uterus with their bad Supreme Court ruling, now you want to take a knee. No. You find another way to make your point. But don't completely ignore the struggle of Black people that was implemented in a way to call out a specific issue. Police brutality and police violence against unarmed Black people. That's what the taking a knee is about. A specific issue. Don't take that and hijack it and make it about your issue now because you're scared. After you've ignored our issue, we've had enough of that. This whole... I understand the outrage and the fear at the confirmation hearings. I understand that for some people, this is the first time they've seen anything like this travesty of a confirmation hearing, and especially this travesty of an FBI investigation in their lives, because some people are young and some people just haven't been paying attention to politics like I do. But if you're not going to listen to the people who have the knowledge and the understanding because they've lived it and they've seen the history, then how do you expect us to want to fight with you? I don't get that. I mean, I've seen Black people outside of myself telling some, and some white people, not just Black people, but and some white people too, who completely understand that what's going on with the Supreme Court is not new. And what's going on with this Trump administration, this is also not new. This is the culmination of decades of planning and maneuvering and politicking and grassroots activism in all kinds of different ways by the GOP and the Christian right. This administration is what they have been working toward for decades. And I'm seeing a lot of Black people and a lot of white people who get it, trying to explain to the new folks, to a lot of the Bernie pups who are all freaked out. This ain't new, boo. We've been fighting this for decades. Honestly, we've been fighting this for centuries. But when I see these people not wanting to take the knowledge from the people who have it and do a course correction in the way they look at these situations and the way they respond and who they ally with, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to just keep wanting to chasing after you for your support when you've made it clear you don't give a damn about our struggle? No. And I know I've had people tell me past couple of days, oh, you're just keeping us divided. No, that's the politicians who've done that. That's white supremacy that's done that. White supremacy has kept us divided. And let's be real honest now. When we're talking about white supremacy and white male patriarchy, please don't think that just because we are saying patriarchy is the problem, that part of the problem is not white women. Please get it out of your mind that no woman in her right mind would vote for somebody like Donald Trump. I mean, those were not actresses who were at his rallies, who are still at his rallies. Those people are telling you they like this man, and they're also telling you that they don't give a damn that you don't like them because they like him. Because, see, white women have historically, and I mean historically, from the origins of this country historically, align themselves with the people who are in power. And too often, I know I'm all over the place today, but it's all connected. And if you don't understand this history, of course you don't get why we're here. And if you don't understand this history, of course you don't get why those of us who do understand this history are so damn frustrated with you. But white women have historically aligned themselves with the people who are in power. Because, see, they benefit from that power. Even while they were not able to vote, even while they weren't able to own land or get an inheritance or work outside of the home or have a bank account, they still benefited from male patriarchy. Because, see, they were able to live in a nice house. They were able to have nice things that their husbands' paychecks from their jobs where they discriminated against black people allowed them to have. They felt like they were able to send their kids to decent schools where black people had to make do with whatever crumbs we got. And whenever black people pushed for equality in the society and justice, don't think that it was just white men who were out there screaming and yelling and spitting in black children's faces when all they were asking for was equal protection under the law and justice that any human being would want. It wasn't just white men out there spitting on Ruby Bridges. It was white women too. A lot of white women. Let me tell you a little story. I posted this on my page, but I'm going to tell you this little story. My grandmother was a cook in truck stops on Route 301. Route 301 runs through our hometown in Jarrett, Virginia. Jarrett, Virginia is 90 miles south of Richmond. It is as southern as any other southern town. It was segregated during Jim Crow. There was a Klan chapter there. But my grandmother worked as a cook in a couple of truck stops. You can still see the buildings, even though the truck stops are closed. They were open. They were actually open when I was a kid, and she worked there then when I was young. And I asked her before she passed a couple of years ago at Christmas to talk to me about growing up in our hometown. What was it like living in a segregated town? And what was it like sending my mom to that school where my mom integrated the school, you know, putting my mom on that bus with all those white kids. And so my grandmother tells me the story about how she would go to work at the truck stop as a cook, and she would talk to the white ladies in the kitchen. And she said, you know, the ladies were nice. I mean, it's not like they were in the kitchen calling me nigger. You know, they didn't. They were nice. We talked about our kids. We talked about our husbands. You know, we talked about church, stuff like that. She said, so it wasn't that the ladies in the kitchen were just openly racist and hateful. She said, but their husbands were. So when they would see me in town, if they did see me in town, they were never as nice to me when they saw me on the street as they were when we were in the kitchen cooking. Because, see, we had to step off the sidewalk to let white people pass for a time in town. And some of those same nice white ladies who would be talking to me about my kids and their kids in the kitchen at the truck stop, they would expect me and my kids and my husband to move off the sidewalk for them and their husbands and their kids. These are the same nice white ladies who were married to the same men who would terrorize black families, who would threaten violence against black children for wanting to integrate the high school to go to a better school. So as nice as those nice white ladies were in the kitchen with my grandma, they were still married to violent racist monsters. And if you think those women were victims of a bunch of abusive men think again. They stayed married to them. They cooked their dinner. They had their babies. They let those racist monsters instill their racist hatred into their children. After their husbands went off on their Klan rallies or came home from terrorizing some black family, they cooked them Bama's dinner. They laid down in that bed with them every night. All those women didn't do that because they were terrified of their husbands. They did it because there was benefit for them in the social order that their husbands' hatred and violence maintained. And I know that's real uncomfortable for a lot of white people to hear, but damn it to hell, that's the truth. And that's the hypocrisy that I'm really tired of seeing from so many white women right now, all terrified about what's going to happen to them now that Kavanaugh is on the Supreme Court. But the entire time the Supreme Court has been chipping away at the human rights and the constitutional rights of black people and other marginalized people in this country, these same hysterical white women didn't give a damn, did not give a damn that the Supreme Court ruled in favor of stop and frisk. And not even the Supreme Court. Understand that up until 1976 or so, the United States government was forcibly sterilizing Native American women. Yeah. Didn't even take the Supreme Court to do that. No. The government just decided we don't want these people having any more Native American babies. No more red babies. So we're going to make sure they don't procreate. So the government had a program that up until about 1976 or so that admitted, I think it was NIH, admitted that the government on some Native reservations was sterilizing Native American women against their will. You want to talk about you're scared now that the Supreme Court is gonna take away your right to autonomy over your body? Oh yeah? Talk to our Native sisters about not having any autonomy over their bodies. Supreme Court had nothing to do with that. You want to talk about being afraid of what men will do to you? Ask your average Native American or black person. Who knows where all these missing Native American and black... No? Oh, you didn't know there was a problem? You didn't know there was an epidemic of missing Native American women that nobody gives a shit about? Oh, you didn't know that? Why? But I thought we were supposed to be all solid. Well, I thought we were supposed to have all this solidarity, all this sisterhood. If you're concerned about sisterhood, explain to me how you don't know about the problems of your sisters. See, I know all about y'all's problems. I know all about the problems of the white lady, of the middle-class white lady, including the liberal middle-class white lady. Y'all are mad that Roe v. Wade is about to be overturned. That's pretty much it. You might be kind of mad about Title IX, maybe. You're obviously mad about sexual harassment in the workplace, and you should be. You absolutely should be. But that's all y'all care about because, see, those are things that directly affect your lives. You don't have to worry about people coming into your house, dragging you off in the middle of the night, and no local or federal authority that's supposed to be law enforcement is going to launch an investigation to find you or anybody in your... That doesn't happen to you. That happens to Native women, though. It happens to black women, though. Why aren't you concerned about your sisters? If we're talking about solidarity now, you want me to be all concerned that Kavanaugh is going to take away Roe versus Wade for you? Honey, poor black women and poor Latino women can't even get a damn pap smear at a Planned Parenthood clinic because liberal women have been so shitty at making the case that Planned Parenthood needs to be protected because it provides health care, not just abortions, but health care for poor women who wouldn't get it otherwise. Because all y'all focus on is abortion. Like a bunch of poor people have a bunch of money to go have an abortion. So I'm looking at these discussions, this hysterical, just I don't even know what else to call it, because listen, I'm not trying to minimize anybody's fear. I know that's how it comes off. And in my mind, okay, yeah, sometimes I am trying to minimize people's fear because it gets on my nerves, because I'm afraid all the time. You don't understand what it is like to be a black woman in a family full of black men and to be terrified that one day you're going to have one of those men in your family tell you, or you're going to get a call from somebody saying so-and-so is in the hospital because they had an encounter with the police. And that's not like this imagined sort of, oh, that doesn't happen to a lot of people. No, it is a very real fear that we live with. Right along with being in a workplace where even white women treat you like garbage because they think you're not qualified because you're black. And they're jockeying for position to be recognized and noticed by the white man who's in charge. Come on now, I've seen this with my own eyes. Hell, I experienced that a few months ago. So I think my big frustration with the way people are responding to this Kavanaugh confirmation is not that people are upset. Okay, I expect people to be upset. I'm upset. But when I look at this confirmation in the broader scope of history, I can honestly look at it and say, well, you know what? This isn't the worst thing the Supreme Court has done. And it's not the first horrible thing the Supreme Court has done. It's not the first horrible person they've had on the Supreme Court. And trust me, any decision this Supreme Court comes up with that is going to be negative for any group of people, believe me, the Supreme Court has come up with some much worse shit. We're living with a lot of that shit. So what does this all mean? Whew. I think this means what we have always said it means. We being the Luqmans, me and Abda Shahid. We meaning black people in general. Certainly black activists. I think this means what we have always said it means. Unless black people are free, nobody is free. Nobody. See, white women have been able to enjoy the perks of patriarchy and white supremacy, even when they couldn't get a bank account on their own, even when, they couldn't even learn how to drive without their husband's permission, even when they couldn't do jobs outside of being a cook and a secretary. White women still benefited from white supremacy and white male patriarchy. Well, there's no such thing as any other kind of patriarchy. I don't know why I keep saying that. Patriarchy. White women have always been able to benefit from that, even as they have fought for their rights. But here's the problem. White women have fought for the right to be equal to white men. That's the problem. That has been the entire problem with white women's fight for rights in this country. The fight has never been for the equal rights of all human beings. That has never been what white women have fought for in this country. The fight has always been for white women to be equal with white men. And if white men and their power is your standard, if that's your bar, then the rest of us are always going to be left out. Always. Because that is what white supremacy is built on. The oppression and the disenfranchisement of everybody who ain't white and male. So I think that for us, this fight doesn't change. For those of you who are watching, who you've known me for a while, you know I ain't gonna change. I die first. I mean, I die first before I retract anything I've ever said about this particular fight, because I didn't come up with this stuff. Smarter people than me. I get my information from my elders and my ancestors. People who have documented this and who have struggled in this fight for much longer than I have, decades longer than I have, centuries longer than I have. Posted plenty of that information for you. So this doesn't change for me. Kavanaugh being on the Supreme Court doesn't make my life any worse. I mean, it doesn't. For a lot of black people, just like when Trump was elected, we're like, what's going to change? Our life still sucks. But see, when you've never had to deal with the effects of the policies from this government, from this thing we call government and this thing we think is a democracy, when you've never had to deal with the effects of this stuff, of course you can look at this current administration and be shocked and appalled. But when you've been fighting it all your life, when you have recognized your whole life just about that you are treated by your government differently than other people are treated, you're like, okay, what's new? None of this is new. None of this is new, y'all. But if you want it to change, if you really want to do something about this system, you're going to have to completely destroy white supremacy and patriarchy. And that does mean you're going to have to throw some white women away. It does. It does. Because the Susan Collinses and you know, these white women who voted for Trump and these white women who use Hillary Clinton as an example of the kind of woman we want in office, who is going to appoint better people for the Supreme Court because she would never appoint, or she'd never nominate a rapist. She's married to one. How are you? We need to throw those women away. You need to be prepared to throw those women away, y'all. Just like black folk are prepared to throw some of our folk away because they don't want the revolution. They're happy in their McMansions, in their middle class enclave. Some of them. You're not gonna get everybody on the revolution. Everybody doesn't want revolution. Everybody doesn't want change. Some people think they're doing just fine in this system. And that's okay. That's all right. But I'm not letting those people dictate to me what I'm supposed to expect as a citizen. So, okay, I get that you're upset and you're afraid, and you think your life is about to end, and you think Brett Kavanaugh is about to come and just snatch your uterus right out of your loins and put a camera in there. And I get it. I understand. Okay. All right. Collect yourself, honey. Collect yourself. We don't have time. There is no time for this falling apart foolishness. We've been fighting this fight a long ass time. You're new to it. You got a lot to learn. You got a lot of catching up to do. And there's not a lot of time left on this clock. We've been trying to tell you all this time. Now that you finally are aware that there is a problem that actually affects you, how you respond now is up to you. But understand that how you respond also determines how far you get. And if you don't listen to the people who've been in this struggle for the longest time, you ain't gonna get far. Either black people get free or nobody's free. You either ally with and fight with black people, or you keep treading water by yourself. So I said my piece. I'm going to go home and continue to enjoy my birthday weekend. Thank y'all very much for listening. Share this video and just take a deep breath, man, and just live to fight another day, because fight we must. Fight ain't going nowhere. Thanks. Peace.